Yeah, how was that?
Well, it was, they didn't have any competition. And it's been almost 3 months, and I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
I have to have my camera more, and I can get back
Does it
to my
hurt?
low car. No, wow. Anything.
That's great.
Only, you have no anything afterwards because you have no battery.
Right,
But you
but
have the
it's so surgery.
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. How you doing? Good to see you. Yeah, good to see you too. Well, sounds like we've got some exciting things happening.
Okay.
That's exciting. Sounds like we got a lot of restructuring. I don't know what's
Mark or Gary? I think Gary knows.
Hear me for a minute. I have something like
I'm not sure we're all we are, you know.
Yeah, I was here.
Yeah.
Dave knew.
Huh?
Someone knew.
I'm sure somebody knows.
and maybe we will find out.
Yeah, I've been reading it, but I don't.
Yeah, they didn't specifically say, but because I think we're all. I don't know.
So do we have to watch RC?
That's what it looks like.
That's what I read.
Yeah, that's the way I see it too.
4 through 9, and that would be
And
everybody.
they can choose to accept or not accept.
That's what I read. Is that how it's done?
That's how I read it. Especially the seats 4, 3, and 9. And then, of course, the 1 through 3. Good morning.
Okay.
Good morning. How we all doing? Good morning. How we doing?
Yeah, I don't think that's facility here.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can change that.
This is second time, this is this time. We got generally well, you know, I kind of like years ago. Yeah.
No, Mike Path's fine. The thing about Mike Path
Here we
is
go
then
again.
he caps how much we're going to spend on product control.
The way I understood it.
As opposed to having some.
6, 1, 3. Yeah, your board determines who's.
Mike, tell him.
I think what I'm going to do is sign it, let somebody else. Yeah.
Okay, you start it. Yeah. Start it.
Yeah. Well, I've been here 14 years. It's time to.
He likes to tell. Tell.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's time for somebody to.
He'll be up there chatting all day.
I don't think I want to be Cindy. We're over here. Is this me? Yeah. Looks like me. Scott, you doing okay? I am. Scott, good morning. How you doing, buddy? I don't want to forget public comments today. It looks like we got a lot too. Hey, Amy, how you doing? Good.
It's nice.
Hello.
Oh,
Good, you got it
he's
on
going
the
about that
screen,
clock.
too,
That clock's slow.
Microphone's on. Hello.
Yeah.
All right, according to my clock, is that clock on the wall slow?
Yes, sir.
All right, y'all ready to get started? Good morning. There it goes. What you know. Meeting's called to order. We'll take roll call. Gus Andrews. Here. Amy Coble-Wise. Here. Richard Bellman. Maurice Gilbert. Here. Scott Russell. Here. Pam Avera.
Here.
Carol Pauls. Here. Commissioner Cindy Meadows. Tim Norris here. We have a quorum. Okay, first we want to start with the approval of minutes. All right, 1 minute. Let's see on page under the Kellogg property improvements and request for support. It was Julie Terrell of the Choctaw Basin Alliance that presented to us that day. Not Jill. I think we got Jill Galpin. just make those changes, please. Okay, that's the only one I see. Any others? All right, we have a motion from Gus and second from Richard. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion approved. Thank you.
Good morning. Before you have your November and December expenditures and financial reports for the revenues that were collected. Yesterday, we got good news that the December collections came in at 5.44% over 2012 December. And for the year, we are at 1.45% up. You can see that the expenditures, we are right on target for the quarter with 25% of the budget expended. Anybody have any questions?
I've got a question. Let's see. American Government Services, who are they? We got a $36,000 expenditure there. Who are they, or what do they do?
That was the contract that we did for the title searches for the easements for beach nourishment. They were, their cost was $475 each, and we have done approximately 875 title searches. And that contract is complete.
Okay, and then Brad's going to give us an update on that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. That's all that I have.
Anybody?
Anybody else? All right. Thank you.
Motion, please.
Motion. We have a motion? We have a motion approved from Scott Russell. Second from Richard Velman. All in favor?
Thank
Those
you.
opposed, like sign. Motion approved. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, council members. The next issue is, our next item on the agenda is the half cent for emerging markets. As you know, it sunsets at the end of September. This is the third meeting in a row we've discussed this topic. We're asking for guidance on what you all would like to see. The three options being let it sunset, continue it for a low-cost carrier, or modify it. And so we just want to get a sense of the council on what you'd like to see.
And I've done a couple of meetings with Michelle, getting familiar with the financials and
Can't hear you.
You have to.
I've done a couple of meetings with Michelle where we can get familiar with the financials, making sure I'm overly familiar with the processes. And one of the things I mentioned to Jim is trying to be possibly ready for some type of recommendation, that it really is this group's decision. I can tell you there seems to be a sentiment that I think there's a couple of ways to look at it. The commission, I think, feels very strongly.
You got to talk in. Just pull it to you.
Pull it to me.
Yeah.
Push, yeah.
Okay, can everybody hear me now? I wonder if I'm off.
There you go.
Hello?
You're on.
Any better?
You're on.
Hello, test. Basically, I think we've got a couple of things. I started to say, I'm sure y'all were happy this has been off all this time. I think one of the ways, I know one of the questions I asked Jim and or Michelle, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is we have the subcommittee that is what do they call the larger bed tax collectors, or the CEO group, and kind of what their general sentiment was. And I think what was indicated is it was very mixed. I think there's a feeling from the commission that they did indicate that it would be sunset. Having said that, I think we are starting to see a leveling off from the money that we had for marketing for the BP funds. I can tell you my personal opinion would be that we would not recommend that it be sunset. I would like to see it earmarked for either marketing or possibly destination improvements. But again, I'm one person, obviously, and so there doesn't seem to be an overriding sentiment between the bed tax collectors that I've been able to mention it to, and even from what I think Jim and Carol got from the group that they spoke with. So that's what makes this such a difficult topic. I certainly understand the commission's desire to do, if they indicated, or I guess some of their predecessors indicated it would be sunset. But again, when you're looking at numbers that we feel are starting to level, which we would expect to level after that kind of money in the market, after BP, I think to take a half cent off the table that could be used to help us increase room nights is a mistake. But that's my opinion.
Anyone else?
Yeah, just
Richard?
my offer on.
You're off.
Good. Is that better? The biggest concern I have is that this was scheduled to be sunsetted either way. And believe it or not, one of the issues that Richard Feldman, as a bed tax collector, has is sticker shock. We just added the half cent for on the sales tax, so we're at 12% right now, and that's a big hit for every renter, for every head and every bed that comes in here. And I think when this did what it was supposed to do, and it did what we wanted it to with Southwest, and my opinion is that we sunset it.
And I'm gonna, go from the, where my most experience is in the sales and marketing arena. And I know there's sentiment out there that people feel that, we don't need to market our season, the summer months, as much. I think what people forget to realize is that the role of the TDC is to market the area and to ensure that demand continues to come to the area, and then those bed tax collectors within the area set prices based on demand. If we're not out marketing, demand is not coming, and therefore prices will start to erode. If you look what's happening in the marketplace right now, the amount of price cutting within the bed tax collectors in our area is pretty severe. That damages the brand, and I think that is important to note. Especially the TDC is charged with maintaining the brand of South Walton, and we were able to build that brand up because of the vast amount of marketing dollars that we had from BP. If you look from if you did a bar chart of when the BP monies started and when the BP monies started to decline, that was also, you would skew it with the bed tax revenues percentages as well. My fear is that if we pull this money out and not have it go to marketing, we will see continued erosion of demand. We have the potential right now with the emerging markets. We've penetrated emerging markets very well. We need to continue to hit those emerging markets hard so that we keep the demand up. The emerging markets are the markets that are going to produce our rate, the markets that we are hitting right now. And we all continue to go back and forth that we want rate over occupancy. If we're not marketing, that is not what we will be getting, and we will be competing simply on price and not on brand.
Thanks, Scott.
Well, and I just, one of the things that may play into some people's ultimate vote, and I want to say I agree with everything Richard said and obviously everything Scott said, but and the one thing that everybody needs to consider too is because it will come into play in the discussion, is the amount of money we have in reserves. And that doesn't probably work in the favor of keeping it. To Richard's point, my thought was, I agree with you 100%. We deal with the sticker shock every day, but then we're also looking at, is the 12 versus 11.5 going to give us that much of an advantage? And, and maybe it does, but the reserve amount, I think, now again, the reserve money, I've spent quite a bit of time with Michelle, can be moved among lines, among pennies, should we need to. Having said that, we've got $34 million, I believe, right now in reserves, and 2.4 of that is currently feeding from that half cent when basically the Southwest relationship ended, and not making a decision to this point on how we're going to proceed. The problem obviously being, it's great to consider that reserve number, but when the reserve number's gone, you have nothing feeding it. So again, it's a tough call. That's why I think when you talk to the CEOs, you don't get a unified, yes, let's do it this way, because it is a lot of mixed feelings, I think, among the bed tax collectors. And so yeah, that's about all I could dig up as far as the conversations I've had.
And that half cent is from the consumer, and we, if you put us against any tourist destination, our tax rate is nothing near what those destination tax rates are. I mean, you look at, and it's not necessarily a beach destination. You look at New Orleans, you look at New York. I mean, your tax rate on a hotel bill in New York is almost the same as your room rate. So, I mean, 11.5 to 12 is not that, the consumer doesn't feel that. I don't think the consumer would choose not to come here because of that. That's just my opinion.
That's good point.
Is it okay? I understand what you're saying. Hopefully in 5 years, when the bridge is done and paid off, we'll be down to 11%.
We can keep working in the right direction if we start now.
But I think something that's important to keep in mind for the bed tax collectors like myself, and there's a lot of new ones out there, a lot of small companies, and yes, the market is it's more competitive now than it's been in the 29 years that I've been in the business. And the approach that we take is we sell value, we don't sell rate. And I can't dictate what other people do, but most of the larger rental companies do sell value. They don't sell rate. That's how we stay in business. I don't try to sell my houses based on how much they cost. I base it on the value, and if it's out of somebody's budget, then we recommend something that's less expensive and still give them the value that they're looking for. But, that's just my personal opinion on how I operate, and a lot of the big resorts do operate that way. I don't consider myself a big resort by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that's something to keep in mind, that we need to sell value. We don't need to sell rate.
Yeah, but general rule of thumb is demand is going to push price up or down.
Mm-hmm.
And the offers out there are pretty severe.
Mm-hmm.
It's good points.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
There are two things, pretty basic questions. When this emerging market half-cent was approved, were there conditions around its approval?
There's two conditions on the current half cent. Subparagraph A is for attracting and marketing a low-cost air carrier, and then subparagraph B basically says you can use it to market the general destination outside of Florida or internationally or whatever. So yes, there are.
So there was a specific need for raising that to that half-cent. Is there a specific need now for continuing it? I mean, I've heard no specifics from those who support it. And
That's a good question.
There's some very good points made by the three speakers, and that's really a question. My personal position is either sunset it because of the rate, the relief from the rate, but I will tell you our neighboring tourist development areas are both at 5 cents. So at 4.5 cents, we're still less. I also understand the argument about the 34 million in reserves. When we get into the beach nourishment, you will probably see us recommend that we take about 20 million out of that reserves, the 10 million that's in the beach nourishment, obviously, reserves, and then another 10 million out of the admin reserves, because those reserves put a target on our back, and they don't really do anything. And pay off the beach nourishment early or more quickly is probably the best use of those reserves, because that's going to add more value to this destination than anything else. When the storm protection project, I can hear him right there behind me going, it's not beach nourishment. No, but I think the decision, the question we ought to ask the BCC is, if we're going to continue this drift toward becoming a destination management organization as opposed to a destination marketing organization, then what I would like to see and what I would recommend to y'all is we take that half cent, and that's the revenue stream, the revenue source for that. So you put the bike path maintenance, you put the bridge construction, you put the signage for the coastal dune lakes, you put all that, and you say, whatever that half cent generates every year, that's what you do. You do it for destination improvements. And then everything else, you leave the marketing money alone, because right now, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And we shouldn't have that. And I know there are some purists that say you shouldn't be doing any of that. I'm not in that camp. I do what the Board of County Commissioners tells us we have to do. And if they want to do the maintenance or the management of the destination, that's fine, but identify the resource to do that. Don't keep telling me, well, just take it out of your first 2 pennies, because that's probably not the best use of those 2 pennies, to be honest with you, to fulfill our primary mission, which we understand is protecting the brand and marketing this destination.
So what you're recommending is that this half cent not be sunset, but rather be dedicated to destination improvements. Did I understand that?
What I'm basically saying is I'm agreeing with the premise of your second question, which is if you're going to keep it, you need to identify the specific purpose you want to keep it for. Mm-hmm. If not, sunset it. And then we can have another conversation on how much we're going to rob out of the first 2 pennies to do all these things. And I can make the argument that protecting the brand includes maintaining that bike path and helping those coastal dune lakes, because that is integral to what people come here for. That's what they associate us with. So yes, I agree with the premise of your second question.
Yeah, and I wouldn't support it unless I knew what it was specifically being targeted for. And my point is that we can't let go of any of the marketing, for erosion of the brand. I do question, what Jim stated, that the direction of going to a destination management organization as opposed to a destination marketing organization, is I didn't know that was necessarily the direction. I hadn't heard that because, if you look at the mission, it is marketing the brand as well as maintaining the area. So that's the first time I've really heard it poised like that. And as someone in the community, I would, question saying that was the direction, when knowing that ultimately, the organization is about marketing the destination, and the destination brand needs to uphold itself so that we're marketing a great product.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just say this. Everybody's got good points. I've been for and against. I'm bouncing back and forth, but the fact of the matter is I voted against it back when we implemented this. And over time, you see what it's for and how it's been used, and Jim's made some good points. Everybody's made some good points. But you get to the point where I noticed the bike paths, things that we need to be maintained, and we see the county doesn't have all the money, but these are the things that draw to our area, is the bike paths to certain things, but they're starting to get a little worn. And we've got to start looking at taking care of these, being more proactive. And if this is already sitting there, and we've got money to be able to maintain and enhance what we have, then, you get to a point where you got to say, let's keep it, let's put it to good use, and we have a direction to utilize it. So that's my position.
And I would just add one other point. For those of you who don't know, last night Southwest released the locations, the destinations that it will be flying directly to from Love Field. Probably our fastest growing market is the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We're seeing huge numbers come out of there. And we being Northwest Florida, not just ECP, did not get one of those direct flights. I think there's 5 destinations that'll start October the 13th, and then in November they do a bunch more. There'll be 3 in Florida: Orlando, which makes sense; Fort Lauderdale, which makes sense; and Tampa, which I would kind of question because it's really closer. If I get a chance, or if you ever get a chance, you go, really, Tampa? Why don't you pick one of the airports up here? Because you have a lot of folks coming here. But we could still conceivably use that to attract a low-cost air carrier even if they were to change one of those routes to come into here or add a route to come into here, they're limited to 20 gates at Love Field, so that kind of makes, it's a process, a flow thing. You just can't get enough planes through there.
Yeah.
But
And
that might be an option also.
And like in any budget, once it's gone, it's hard to get back.
Yes.
So I would think really hard about that, because once it's gone, we're talking years. Years of lobbying and proving, not that we wouldn't have to prove to not sunset it, but prove why we're adding something. And I would caution that very much.
Jim, could you clarify for me one more time?
Yes, sir.
I guess I'm a little confused.
Okay.
Would this still stay, this half cent still stay for emerging markets, and then we would take a half cent away from the 2 penny?
No,
for-
there's 3 options on the table.
Okay.
Sunset it. You don't have to take any action. The BCC doesn't have to take any action because it is written into it that it's going to sunset.
And what was the date again, Jim?
Into September.
Yeah.
You can say, we want to keep it, and we want to keep it for emerging markets. So basically, you just want to remove the sunset clause and keep the ordinance as it's written. Or you can keep the ordinance but modify the purpose. And so my recommendation is to keep the ordinance, but to modify the purpose to whatever purpose. But if it doesn't have a purpose, if y'all can't agree on a purpose, or the BCC doesn't approve a purpose, then it ought to be sunset, because we just shouldn't be collecting money to collect money.
But the thing, and I'll go back to this, Jim, I totally agree. As during the last strategic session when we were looking at the budget, the push was to take some of the money and have it go to the maintenance side of it. And if that's going to continue, which I'm asking for your guidance in what if that is still going to continue, that is going to be pushed by the BCC of the TDC funding, then my recommendation would be that half cent go directly to that, and therefore the marketing dollars are never touched. And therefore, that discussion doesn't come up in the strategic session. It's like, this is the amount of money, this half cent, this is what we have for area enhancements, and budget it just like we would budget a marketing budget. Once it's gone, it's gone. We can't do every project every year. What projects are the most important and vital to our area, and move forward, because if not, we will lose the half cent, and then we're still going to have direction that we have to do bike paths out of this money, we have to do this out of this money, who knows what a sports complex may come up out of this money, therefore continuing to erode dollars that should be spent on marketing.
Agreed.
That's good. Good point. Very good.
Well, you're brilliant this morning, Scott.
What's that?
Said you're brilliant this morning.
He's on it. He's on fire. Look out. Well,
There was nothing on TV last night.
You want to, Scott, you want to put that in motion?
Are you suggesting that we use this, that we keep the half cent in and use it for maintenance?
I think destination improvements is what it's, and that could take the form of capital or maintenance, is what I'm
The
hearing.
battle goes away with marketing dollars and improvements.
Which has been an area of not favorable responses on two sides of discussions for the past year and a half. So, I feel that if it were earmarked for that, then it would satisfy desires of a fraction, and then also maintaining the integrity of the marketing monies that we have, and that those dollars are not touched again in the future. there for that, and then that half-cent for that.
Well, I think that's another thing, that it just makes the language of the ordinance very, very important, because, I mean, that's the crux, though. It boxes in what I think we feel at one point from the strategic planning conversations that we had might have been an unfair burden being placed upon bed tax collectors, and it was kind of came down to, look, the county's not going to fund it, it's either or. And so I think, it's important that if they move forward, we move forward, this group, whoever they are, moves forward, that they understand exactly what that language in that ordinance is.
So, do we want to have a motion, Scott?
But before we put that motion, Mr. Chairman, let me just interject, just so that everybody is clear. This is enacted specifically pursuant to a statutory provision. That statutory provision provides two uses. One is to pay debt service on bonds that have been issued to finance the acquisition of a professional sports franchise or pay for those stadiums. We don't have such bonds. That's not going to be an issue. You can ignore that right off the top. The second one is what this has always been used for. And it doesn't mean that what Mr. Russell is proposing can't be done, but I do want the council to understand that to allocate it that narrowly is going to require a little effort on the BCC's part. And the reason why is the second category says it may be used to promote and advertise tourism in the state of Florida and nationally and internationally. However, if tax revenues are expended on activity, service, venue, or event, in sum, one of the main purposes of those must be the attraction of tourists, as evidenced by the promotion of that. So if we're talking about maintenance, capital improvements, the BCC is necessarily going to have to make a finding that every one of those capital improvement projects or maintenance projects promotes or advertises tourism and falls into that activity, service, venue, or event. Now, it could be a service that we're providing. It could fall under activity. It could fall under venue. But I just want you to be clear that not all capital improvement projects fall under that, and the BCC has seen it. Also, Jim and I talked about this earlier, and I don't think it's specifically been mentioned, but when we start talking about capital improvement projects, at some point in time it always comes up, well, beach nourishment, beach maintenance. That's going to specifically come out of the third penny, which was enacted. That penny, which is a separate statutory levy that the BCC takes after the first 2 cents, has none of those restrictions like that, and that's why it can go to beach nourishment. But this is going to be specifically limited. Y'all seen this before. It's under subsection 5 of the statute. That's what it ties into. So, on the whole, you probably can do it, but I just want the TDC to be aware. Ultimately, the BCC may have to make legislative findings, and I'll tell you up front, it's going to be difficult to certify that all capital improvements or all maintenance type projects actually qualify under that provision. So if we earmark it for destination improvements broadly, with the intent being to improve the destination, to help supplement capital improvement projects, that's probably the direction you would want to go if that's where the board's going. I would caution against saying it must be used for capital improvement and maintenance only. That's something that I think you're going to have to take up on a year-by-year basis. And I'd also note that for us to do this, Jim's point he made earlier is correct. I think we're already past this, but I do want the board to understand. If the board wants to continue this half-cent, they are going to have to take some action to do this, and it is going to require an amendment of the ordinance. So I would recommend to the board, since it is your duty to make recommendations on these issues, that you do make a recommendation of some nature to the BCC, because they're going to have to amend the ordinance at least to remove the low-cost airline provision out of it. So when they do that, that's the time to do it all at once, as well as when they're doing the sunset. So they can't simply say, well, we're just going to change the date in the ordinance. They're going to have to strike that part about the airline no matter what. So just as an advisement, it's going to get changed in some way. So just so nobody's up there thinking, well, I just vote to extend it, but I don't want to put additional conditions on it. The BCC is probably going to end up doing something different to what it's worded right now, just so you know and your constituents know that.
And Clay, and totally agree. And I feel that, the improvements that are done should be directly related to tourism and how it will affect the tourism. Just as the bike path, the discussion of the strategic planning was that our tourists use the bike path. It's a reason that they come down here as bike. Whether I agree or not for coming out of the money, that discussion would have to take place in each of those things, that it does support the tourism. So I 100% agree.
There you go.
Okay. All right, we have Any other discussion?
Only that I think based on what's said, I don't know that the motion is a final recommendation yet. I think this council has to look at the recommended changes to the ordinance. Would that not be what we would recommend to the BCC and approve versus just a blanket motion to do X, Y, Z?
Well, I believe the appropriate position from the board initially is to make a recommendation regarding the half-cent sales tax.
Okay.
The board itself does not hold public hearings and cannot adopt ordinances. The BCC may well wish for your input on that issue, but I think the initial step is to make a recommendation about what to do with the half-cent. And then at that point, it's going to not just be at our level, it's going to be at county legal's level. There's going to be a lot of eyes on an ordinance revision before it ever comes back.
Fair enough.
So we need a recommendation to continue.
To continue the half cent and change the stipulation of where that half cent goes, alleviating the low-cost air carrier and adopting that the half cent be used on destination management improvements that are related to tourism.
Okay.
Or that specifically are used to attract tourists.
Attract tourists. I was close.
That's good enough.
That was really
Okay,
good.
for the record, okay. All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Pam seconds. Do we have any discussion? Anybody from the public want to make a, or state your name, please?
Sure. My name is Art Miller, and thank you for acknowledging me. As you may know, I was part of a team, the ISP, that did the management audit for the TDC a few months ago. And there are a couple of things that I just wanted to bring to your attention. For a long time, I was generally opposed to continuation of it. And I've rethought that a little bit, and let me share a couple of thoughts with you. First of all, when we did the study for the TDC, one of the items that we researched and found was what is charged in the way of bed tax around the state. And I happen to have that chart with me today. And looking at it, I'm surprised to see that we're kind of on the low side, the 4.5%. And I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Feldman, about the sticker shock. But on the other hand, our neighbors to the east and west have 5%. Miami-Dade has 6%. Orlando has 5%. All of the South Atlantic counties have 5% or 6%. Fort Myers is 5%. So we're a little bit on the low side in terms of the 0.5%. Also, when I hear you talk about 0.5%, it doesn't sound like much, but translating it into real dollars, we're talking about $2 million here. $2 million is a lot of money to just say we don't want to collect that anymore. And so $2 million to the reason or to the cause that you're talking about makes a lot of sense to us. That is the destination improvement, or however Clay wants to phrase it, but basically to create the demand that Scott's talking about is, I think, a very wise move. Also, with regard to what Jim Bagby was saying about Southwest Airlines, as you may know, the Wright Amendment is going to change things in Dallas Love because going back about 40 years when the Wright Amendment was passed, it limited where people could fly from Love. It had to be to a contiguous destination. That is going away, so the markets are really going to open up. Having a lot of background in airlines, I can tell you that Southwest is not going to miss an opportunity here. So while they might not identify us or ECP as an initial place to fly once the Wright Amendment sunsets, I think in short order they will recognize there's a market here. And also, given the merger with American and United, it could American and US Air, I think it's a good possibility that they will wake up to the opportunity here and start flying from Dallas. So, but that's on the if come. We shouldn't be counting on that. But I'm saying I think there's reason to be optimistic that those markets will open up to us. And so we do want to spend the dollars wisely. But $2 million is not something that you want to dismiss lightly. I would urge you to consider what Jim is recommending, that you do keep it, even though it does present sticker shock to people. I don't know that I agree with your analysis or the comparison, Scott, with New York, because that's a different world. But I think more closer to home, as I said earlier, we're very much in the ballpark, slightly under the average. As I look at this, in terms of beach counties, not necessarily. There are some smaller counties where it's 2 and 3%, but the major markets, and as you may recall, we're number 10 in bed tax collection. So I think we're a major market in every respect in Florida. So I would urge you to consider keeping it and using it for the reasons that Jim mentioned.
Thank you, Art.
One comment while you're up there. I just want you all to just take note that it isn't just the bed tax. because we have sales tax in Walton County that's higher than our adjoining counties.
Right.
We're at 7.5%. I think Okaloosa's at 6%, Jim.
Let me give you a simple example, though.
So you can't use just the bed tax. You got to take the bed
Oh,
tax and
absolutely,
the
sure.
sales tax.
2 years ago, I had an opportunity I had to go to Houston 17 times. And I flew from VPS to Houston 17 times. I rented a car from Avis every time, 17 times. And the rate was always $178. When I brought the car back to the airport, I paid $324. $178, and I paid $324. And that was not including gas. So 14%, 10%, 8%, all that sort of thing. I don't even want to look at what the fees were for, but the point is that there's a certain, what would you call it, acceptance of the fact that, oh, that's what I got to do. So I don't think that cutting it is going to make people say, oh, boy, it's a bargain going to Walton County. I'm paying a half cent less than what I'm paying before. They come down here, and if you look at Bay County, they're paying 5%, and they don't have nearly the average daily rate that we have here. And yet they're still paying 5% over there. So I think it's more of a sticker shock for them than it is for us. Sure, we'd like it to go away, but the reality is that the $1.5 million that's being spent this year on bike paths, I think is a very good improvement. And John and others have heard me say before, I hope you expand the marketing to just not talk about the beach. The beach is, without a doubt, the crown jewel. No question about that. But there's so many other things in Walton County that we can bring attention to. Bike paths being one of them. And I'm so glad that $1.5 million was put into the bike paths, because look at this time of year. People don't come down to necessarily take a swim in the Gulf. They come down here to do other things. And you see SUV after SUV going by with 4 bikes on the back. Well, they're staying somewhere, and they're paying the bed tax. So we want to make this a year-round destination. It is a year-round destination. Just let me, one last comment, and I'll sit down. And that is one of the large restaurateurs on 30A made a comment to me recently that in the first time in over 25 years, he made a profit in the first quarter of last year. And that's because the shoulder season is expanding. We're getting more people down here because they're looking at Walton County as not just the beach during go swimming during the beach, but as a year-round kind of a destination. And I think there's a lot more opportunity for growth and opportunity for growth up north too. That's a different topic.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Art.
One thing I'd like to say, a lot of good comments, but when you're talking about the fees that we charge here, the sales tax, every vacation I've ever been on, a family vacation, never have I called there and said, what is your sales tax before I went? And you might ask yourself that. And I know they matter, and I know the sticker shock matters, but people come. They don't,
Right. That's a good point, Gus.
Was that for my benefit?
That's what.
have you?
So thank you very much,
No,
Richard.
but I think it all calculates into the fair market value.
Yeah,
So.
it does.
All right. Any other comments from the public? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion approves unanimously. Okay, Mr. John.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Council. This is not quite as significant as the item A, but still important. As any of you know, with a destination our size and the marketing, the website is essentially the fulfillment of your efforts. Ours is somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 files that produce what the consumers can consume. And it's about 4 years old, which doesn't sound like much, but in the world of technology, that's starting to have run its course. So we have been working hard at considering what our future options are, and we feel at this time that we need to start looking at rebuilding that in a day and age when tablets are exploding. Having a site that's highly responsive and that delivers what we want to the consumer takes another level of technology. So we're before you today to alert you to that and essentially to ask your recommendation that we do go forward with the next generation. Obviously, there's a lot of work involved in that. It takes a great deal of time, but to produce an RFP in the future that would be put out in this fiscal year, which it was not line item budget, but we have great confidence right now in our numbers and our current expenses, that is something that we can accomplish. And so we're before you today to ask for recommendation to allow us to work towards a new version in the future.
Any questions?
John,
Yes, sir.
give us some idea on numbers.
That's a tricky one. I don't want to be conservative, and then I'd rather be aggressive and say that it wouldn't shock folks in the know to talk about maybe $250,000 when we're 6, 9, 12 months down the road in building a massive site. This is not an out-of-the-box situation, but one of our biggest goals would be that this would be a very integrated site. Right now, there's a lot of custom APIs and pulls, and those crash, and that's what had to be done at the time. But the big goal will be to have an incredible consumer experience, but also to have built a site that is ahead of the current technology, which of course always moves.
I have to share something with you.
Yes, sir.
And the reason and it's part of the reason I asked the question, I'm going through the same process, and I agree with you 100%. The technology is changing so fast, and from a marketing standpoint, you're either in the game or you're out of the game. And if you're an aged website, you're out of the game. If you don't, and more of my business, I mean, a tremendous increase percentage-wise of my business, I don't even talk to the guests anymore. I mean, they're just booking online, and it's happening very fast, and I'm in total agreement that we need to keep that website at the cutting edge all the time. I'm totally in favor of what you're suggesting.
And I agree too. It's our most important tool, and moving forward, it should be a line item every year to enhance and upgrade so that it is. I would applaud you if we could always stay ahead of the curve, but being able to stay with the curve is a benefit, and it's your number one tool, and so I wholeheartedly support that.
And I do want to reassure you and thank all the team that's put effort in. There's been constant evolution and improvements, but at some point, one piece at a time becomes less effective than saying it's time to hit the reset.
It's time to buy a new car rather than keep fixing
Yes, sir.
the parts on the old one.
Yep.
Yep. Any other questions? All right, we have a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Got a motion, Richard? Second?
Second.
Scott, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Brad.
Morning, Brad.
Appreciate the opportunity to come and give you all a quick update. Wanted to start by saying that we are continuing to have our beach management committee meetings. Had a really good one yesterday. Gus participated. They ran about an hour and a half. It's always great. We've got some, I guess we'd say, old timers that have been around the block, and then we have a couple of new people. So it leads to some interesting discussions on very detailed back to very basic. And I think that's helpful because it's helping us know what type of information we need to provide in the public. And building on that, we do have a workshop tonight, 6 p.m. here in the annex. Just so you all know, we are continuing to do that also. So every 2 months, when we have the TDC, we'll have Beach Management Committee. I'll give an update here, and then we'll do the workshop at night. So that hits afternoon, morning, and night for all of our residents and those who are interested to hear about it. I think it's a really good place to start with public relations. Building off of what Michelle said earlier with the title service work that was done by AGS, they hit our deadline within a day, which was an incredible effort. When we initially went after this, we had to bid it as a per title search work because we weren't really sure, because it's not just looking at the title search, but also who has the authority to give permission to do beach nourishment and to do the Walton County Hurricane Storm Damage Reduction Project. Like Jim, I have to use both words somewhat so that we make sure people know, but putting sand on the beach. And they came up with roughly 870-ish. Right now it's 872, could be 871, 873. But it was a lot. But the interesting part of that, though, was when you start off with 950 and you get down to the 870s, that's a huge cost savings. And what they've done to get there is not only in the identification of properties, but also linking the ones that go together so that we don't have individual title reports for parcels that are still owned by the same person that are either right beside each other or they own 3 or 4 in a row. They combine the title searches together in the reporting, which at $450 a pop, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're talking 80 It was a huge savings. So it came in under budget and on time, which is the way we like to see all of our projects go. We will be using that information to then develop the easements, and that leads into the second part, and really the focus of yesterday's Beach Management Committee and the workshop tonight. We're trying to make this focused on one individual topic. We'll always give an update for people that have never come before on what's going on, but we're really focusing on the easements this time. We released the language at the last workshop and last meeting. It is on the protectwaltoncountybeaches.com website for people to download. So that easement language is available. We've handed it out to people. We've emailed it to people. We've directed people back to the website because that is our number one informational tool. But tonight, we're going to have representatives from the Corps of Engineers because at our last workshop, we get questions and we want to answer those. And a lot of the questions were focused not on the project design per se, but on the easement. So they asked us to have the representative from the Corps of Engineers because it is a federal project, requires a different type of easement than Western Walton County did. So they're going to be coming in this afternoon. We're going to do a look at some areas on the beach, and then they're going to be part of our presentation tonight. So the residents will be able to hear directly from the Corps on what the easement means, in addition to what the language says. So that's, if you remember, that's our responsibility as the county, and the TDC, as a responsible agency, is to collect those easements. But we have to collect the easement that works for the project. So it's in partnership with the Corps, and they've been a great partner. But that's where we are. So as soon as those easements get fully fleshed out, use the titles, and also create the exhibits that show what the easement's going to look like on each individual property. We're actually doing plan view maps where you're looking down from the sky on where is the easement going to fall on your house or individual condo properties. So it's going to be a really robust package we send out. And we're going to be releasing some of the preliminary information tonight. Which then leads into what is the second part would be the design and engineering, and that's the Corps' responsibility. Corps of Engineers are going to be the engineers of record. They're in the middle of the design right now. Some of the information that they collect is used for the easement language, definitely, but we're not quite to the point to where that would be released yet. They haven't gotten us those design documents, but we expect those within this next period, between this meeting and the next one. So the April meetings for the committee and the workshop will be focused on design. So it's continuing to progress through at a reasonable pace. So the preliminary engineering and design phase, we really are excited about how that's headed. And it's really working well. We haven't had any stops. It is fully funded by the Corps. They have their money, as much money as they need to get through the work this year. They're looking for more money next year, but it's just a little bit of money that they're going to be able to reprogram. We have our money. As Jim mentioned, we do have, and we all know we have the beach nourishment funding, but then we also have the reserve set for construction. But as far as funding moving forward, there's no stop on funding. There's nothing we need to do to get to a final construction set of drawings. But that then ties into the next step, which is construction. And just to give you a quick update, that really is depending on Congress right now. This is a federal project. It requires two things. First off, it requires authorization for construction. Second, it requires appropriations for construction. Well, we can't get appropriations until we get authorization. You're not going to give somebody money for something that you haven't approved. It's the backwards way to do it. So we're having to work with Congress. We have our lobbyists in D.C., Marlowe and Company. I've also been involved in discussions with the House and Senate because if you pay attention to the news, they have all the bills that they're having to work together on. One of them is the Water Resources Development Act, and we're working on that with them. As of now, our project, if it was to be passed with the Senate language, it would be in there. If it's passed with the House language, it wouldn't be in there. The understanding is that they're looking more toward the Senate language on how they authorize projects. Regardless, we feel confident that the way our project's been formulated, in other words, the way it's been done through the Corps, through the feasibility study process, it definitely fits in. It's not unreasonable. We're paying the majority of the cost as a non-federal sponsor, so it looks really good. It's just not moving right now. We've got to get Senator Boxer and Representative Schuster to talk. And so that's just the kids in the sandbox. So that is moving. Once that gets done, then we can get the appropriations. But as I said, that's not a stopping point. This is moving forward. A great partnership with the Corps. And title search work's done. Easements will be underway soon.
That's great.
So that's it in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you. Any questions?
Great work. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Brad. Send to marketing.
Good morning, Council. I'm Lauren Wilson with Sender, and here to give an update over the past 2 months for December and January. We'll start with media, some highlights that we've been working on. We've developed the beach safety media plan, that's going to be mostly very hyper-targeted digital ads. We saw really great responses for that last year, so we're going to continue that for this year. And we're also have developed our emerging markets media plan. That will be targeted cable, television, and digital in Nashville, St. Louis, Houston, and Dallas. We've exceeded $500,000 in added value this year, so that's over 25% of our media buy. For our fall interactive performance, we've seen really great click-through rates. We're exceeding the industry average. And we've seen really great performance from Pandora. That's an example on the television right there. So that was a new buy for this year, so we're going to continue that for next year. For the co-op leads, the only thing I want to point out on this slide, we had 2 fall co-op partners this year, and we guaranteed 2,800 clicks. We over-delivered this by over 2,000 clicks per partner, so we're almost doubling the performance for our co-op partners. Moving on to brand creative, our next steps were finalizing copy and co-op, producing the print and banner ads, and we're scheduled for a summer 2014 launch. We're also planning the television shoot for April. The visitor guides you should have at your place settings. The one thing I wanted to point out, we've produced a map that's in the back, and over 5,000 people requested this from the visitor center last year. So this is a fold-out map that shows the entire county. So we're really excited about this. And if you haven't, this will be on display at Visitor Center. We mail these out from the mail house. So we're very excited about Visitor Guide. There's other enhancements such as a Find Your Perfect Beach Guide on pages 4 to 5 and an app promotion. Moving on to emerging markets. We have a team going to Chicago over President's Day weekend, and we're bringing a full South Walton experience to the 900 shops. This is a very upscale shopping center on Michigan Avenue. We're bringing our Perfect Escape booth. We're going to have fashion designers, music, food. It's really bringing the entire beach to Chicago. It's going to be a great event. And we're doing a social giveaway in conjunction with the 900 shops. So someone will win a 4-day vacation to South Walton. 900 Shops has proven to be a really great partner. We're already guaranteed 2.5 million impressions over that weekend in Chicago, so it's really getting the word out in that market about South Walton. And these are just some pieces that are promoting that event. Other events that we're working on, we're doing a very similar experience at Iroquois Steeplechase in the box seat area. This is a very high-end horse race. In the box seat area, the average household income is $275,000 a year, so it's really our key target market in Nashville. We are also participating in Blog Her Food in Miami the very next weekend. We're going to have our Perfect Escape booth on the trade show floor and then do a very experiential dining event, so an opportunity to showcase South Walton's cuisine. And working on a Dallas initiative for later in September to promote shoulder season. Part of the strategic plan's mission is promoting niche markets. This includes meetings and weddings. This is a key time for weddings. Over 40% of people get engaged between Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day, so we've had a lot of effort in the wedding market. We deployed a wedding behavioral email. This basically, we sent out an email to a list that we had from the Knot.com promotion we did earlier this year. Based on what people clicked on, they were taken to customized landing pages and then received follow-up emails based on their preferences. We had really great responses on that, strong open rates, and qualified leads going to the website. In addition, we sent out a wedding direct mail piece to another list from the Knot.com. This actually deployed the Friday before last. We're pushing people to a customized landing page, so we're tracking that individually as well. And our social team has been partnering closely with the sales team at the TDC to promote the travel shows we're attending and get some social impressions for that. We also participated in a Twitter chat with Jet Set Extra, which is a travel company, and that had 8.7 million impressions, and we had Jet Set Extra retweeting things from the TDC. So we were really excited about that. Social media performance. Since the beginning of the fiscal year, we have garnered more than 11,000 likes. This is up 55%. So this is just from October 1st through the end of January. So we've more than doubled our Facebook following in 4 months. Really excited about that. Also, Instagram has seen really healthy growth. Twitter, we've gotten 1.3 million impressions just in the month of December. The other thing I wanted to point out is Facebook EdgeRank. This is an algorithm that Facebook uses to show where a post will show up on a consumer news feed. We took our EdgeRank and compared it to some competitors of ours, and our EdgeRank is 9, whereas our average competitor's EdgeRank is 3, which means our post is 3 times more likely to show up in someone's news feed as our competitors. So it's a great way to get more exposure for Facebook. And we had talked last time, I think someone on the council had said it would be great if we did a dining video because, and we were actually working on one at the time. This launched last week or the week before last, so I'll let John play that. I think if you just click on it.
It's going to be a struggle.
Okay. Well, you can also go to our YouTube channel or
We will email.
Yeah, or we'll email it. But while we were in market, we also filmed some footage for holidays. We'll be producing that next year. And then we actually have a team in town right now shooting an art video and a girls getaway video. But those are just some of the highlights. Does anyone have any questions?
Where do the videos appear?
They appear on our YouTube channel. We promote them through Facebook. We promote them through Twitter and through our other social media channels.
Okay, good. Good information, Lauren. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We have our first intern of the year from the intern program that we developed, and I'd like to introduce her. Her name is Camille Fournier. She comes to us from University of West Florida. Her degree is in communications and hospitality. She'll be with us for the next 12 weeks, learning everything from construction to beach safety, all in the middle, writing press releases, sales. She'll actually spend time in each department and have tasks that's assigned to her, projects to complete. The other thing I'd like to update y'all on is the construction of the building. We are over halfway through. We have actually successfully moved staff into their new marketing and PR area. Mr. Norris took a tour yesterday, and now they are actually expanding the bathrooms and working on the kitchen conference room area. So they're on the other side of the building, and we're kind of back to normal a little bit. That's it.
Much nicer. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm just going to give you a brief update on some of the things that we're working on in beach maintenance. The Dothan boardwalk repair is still in Department of Environmental Protection permitting process. I got a call from Chance this morning, and I've got to track down the either an easement or a deed in fee simple, and that should be all the documentation they need now to go ahead and complete that application for the permit. The Legion Boat Ramp stormwater project is in permitting with the Corps of Engineers. We are in hopes that we would get some favorable response back from them by mid-February, so that's still on hold. The Grayton Boardwalk replacement project has been bid out. We bid it out, came in over budget, we rebid it, and the County Commission awarded it to RBM. So that project will be moving forward, and the goal is to try to tie it, or I'm going to try to get through spring break, because that's only a couple weeks away, and then in that period window between spring break, end of spring break, and start of season, knock it out. Working on some issues with the Miramar parking deck, working with the contractor that actually built that project, and he has scheduled his team to come out and make some necessary repairs on that. So the beach crew been working on painting restrooms. We've completed all the restrooms on the beach as far as the interior goes, and then also painting all the parking, striping all the parking lots, restriping the parking lots. I had my second destination committee meeting yesterday. It went well. Got an energetic group that I had to remind them that this is a sprint, not a marathon. But they've got some really good ideas and some passion about our destination and how they believe it can be improved. So I'm encouraged that we'll come back to you all with some good recommendations. That's it. Any questions?
No. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
Since we met last, the sales team attended Florida Encounter in West Palm. That is a meeting planner show with one-on-one appointments. We did sponsor the opening reception, which allowed us microphone time to talk about the destination, and we were accompanied by the Sandestin Golf and Beach Resort. A couple weeks ago, January 11th and 12th, we went to Chicago. It was very, 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 very cold. There was about 6 foot of snow. We were at the Rosemont Convention Center, which is in the suburbs of Chicago. There were about 20,000 consumers come through there in 2 days. And then there was a specific time where just travel agents came through. So we got to meet with a lot of travel agents. And when we came back, we sent them boxes of visitor guides for their offices. Thursday, we will be leaving for Boston. That is the Boston Globe Travel Show. This is the 9th year that they have had that show at the Seaport World Trade Center, and that draws about 24,000 visitors, attendees looking for travel. Later in December, or in February, we'll be at the DC Travel and Adventure Show at the DC Convention Center, and that draws about 17,000 people looking specifically for travel. At the end of February, we'll be at the New York Times Travel Show. That is in its 11th year. They have about 21,000 attendees, and then they have about a 6-hour time frame on Friday where it's for travel trade. It's for group travel, travel agents, and so that's the time for that. In our visitor center, since October 1st through January 23rd, January 31st, they have welcomed 4,300 visitors to the visitor center. That's a lot, isn't it?
That's a lot.
Yeah. So despite the construction that's going on at the visitor center, they have found parking and they have made their way into the center. And mainly they're asking for, they're staying in South Walton because the ladies asked where they're staying, but they're asking for directions to things in South Walton, and they're asking for menus. So they're out and about. With the construction going on in the building, the visitor center has a new component in there that has a very large storage closet now, so they'll have all the brochures right at their fingertips. They won't have to go out in the shed periodically throughout the day and fill up their counters. So, and as Michelle said, Tim took the tour yesterday and saw everything, and I think you were amazed.
Nice improvements, yes.
And the visitor center team, they have attended 3 snowbird meetings. This is in conjunction with the Destin and the Walton County Snowbird Association. So they talked to the snowbirds and invited them to come into the visitor center. And in May, when the construction is done with the building, everyone will be invited to an open house in May to see all that. Any questions?
Good luck getting to Boston.
I know. I saw that this morning.
Snow.
Keep your fingers crossed because that's Thursday. We leave for Boston.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Good news, thanks.
Hello again. Just a brief update from Marketing Communications. First, I would appreciate you helping me welcome John Cross. He is our new website coordinator, and guess what? You're going to get to build a new website here as soon as we get him oriented. He's really, his second full day was yesterday, so We are glad to have him, and he helps us a great deal with graphic end of the world as well, besides the web platforms. We talk so much about what we're going to do and where we're headed. I think it's important, though, to talk about just last month, we had the 30A Songwriters Festival down here. We've been a proud sponsor of that from the get-go. And by any account that I've heard, it really does change January in this market. And so the wisdom of this body to expand sponsorship in the past and to continue with that, it's really PR. I mean, we're wanting our message to reach people, media, and creative evangelists. And I'll give you just one example. Christian Bush, who is a half of Sugar Land and travels all over the planet, multiple times referred to that festival in this area as the Sundance without the Hollywood BS. So that's an exceptional compliment, and you could see that it was a genuine thing. So very good results to continue in our future. We've had to reschedule our marketing committee meeting, which was supposed to be last week, and we could have talked a little bit about what happened there, but with the weather, that will be a week from Thursday, and we'll get some updates out to you for that. Beach access signage is something that I feel like I need to touch base with you. Our wayfaring signs that access through regional, we are good to go with the design and the language and legal and all of that stuff. We finally have got a vendor who came in with a solution to do the changeover, and we're trying to get purchasing and finance and all that stuff taken care of. But it's custom aluminum faces, and we're going to recondition those as we go. And so when we get those new signage up, it's going to be a big plus. And then last thing is I just have to revisit briefly, you know, Lauren was talking about the emerging markets and being in Chicago next week. These really have turned into a lot of work, but an opportunity more so. You heard her say 2.5 million impressions right now before we've handed out a single visitor guide. It's because we've built this into a happening. It's not just because we're sponsoring and placing our logo. So we're really looking forward to the 2.5 million impressions, but then everything that we can multiply on top of that when we get a chance to engage and impress upon people that we're not the T-shirt in Corn Dog, Florida. We're a very special place, and so we're have a lot of anticipation for that next week, and that's where we're trying to keep this brand so that demand and value, as you all have talked about, stay where they're at.
John, this is you're taking the I guess the
experiential booth.
Yeah, experiential. Now this y'all took last year to Chicago, right? And that was for the bloggers. Is that?
It went to Blogger. It went to White Linen in New Orleans, and it went to Decatur Book Festival. And we learned a lot about how hard that is. And there's reasons, you know, the big brands in the country pull up with their own semis and back it down. But we feel like, as you might recall, our attention that we garnered in Chicago, we held our own with McDonald's and Dodge and Health Smart Foods and Vitamin Water, who backed their semis down, and we got as much attention as they did. So it takes a pretty good demand to do this, but we think this will even be better this year.
I hope so. This winter, the way it is, they're probably ready to get out of there anyway.
It'll be a big contrast to be outside in slush up to your knees and then come inside and see white sand and beautiful beaches. So we like that contrast.
Good timing. Good job.
Anything else?
Can I ask one question, John?
Yes, ma'am.
The visitor's guide is absolutely beautiful, and I probably missed something, but how do we decide on who the companies and houses listed in the back are?
It is heavily based on all of the bed tax collectors that have submitted information. Everybody who is a bed tax collector in good standing with the clerk's office is able to put information on today that goes on the website. And so that information then is cross-checked and then goes back to the clerk to make sure folks are in good standing. It is a moving target. But that's the core of it. And then you see in connections as we're working for it and mail-outs that go, emails that go out to notifying people that please, if you want to update your listing, visitor guide, deadlines are coming. And those occur in, I'm not even sure if I remember, like October to get to a guide in January. It's a long lead situation. Okay.
Thank you, John. Any other questions? All right. Thanks. Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members. Couple of items, the top 25 working issues. While you're reading through those, update you on a couple of other things that are going on. We will be interviewing 3 candidates for the Director of Administration position on Wednesday. We have 3 very qualified candidates. We have 8 qualified candidates for the Executive Assistant position, but we have not scheduled those interviews yet. And the Director of Beach Operations position job description was posted on the website, on the county website yesterday, I believe. And so we're moving forward with that. And the last position we'll have to fill will be the beach ambassador. Professional development for the team. And I guess before I get to that, I really want to thank the team, and I include Zender and Spring O'Brien and Brad and everybody else. I mean, they have really been doing a great job for the last couple of months. We're pushing the flywheel forward, as they say. And on that point, we'll have our senior leader of professional development this week on Friday. Everybody has read or will have read Good to Great by then, and then we'll go through a discussion on that book because I think it helps explain kind of how operationally we will progress. A couple of other things. On Brad's point, I'm having lunch with Howard Marlowe on Monday and his team on the storm protection project to make sure we know where we are. I'll be up in DC, so we went ahead and scheduled that. We're beginning the FY 14-15 budget development. If you have something that you haven't seen and you want to see, send me an email and we'll try to integrate it into the budget, or at least integrate it into the conversation, as opposed to getting to almost the end and then somebody going, well, why don't we do this? So if we can get it up front, we're trying to identify those. I have a little bit different budget philosophy, probably. We've discussed a little bit. A big reserve does not get you anything. You need a reserve, just like we all have savings or whatever. You need a reserve what you need a reserve for. And when we get a new director of beach operations, one of the first tasks, other than looking at the question of privatizing the beach maintenance services, will be to tell me exactly what it would cost to replace all our walkovers if we had a catastrophic failure. And then that's what we'll reserve for. And that's all we'll reserve for. And so that we can replace that and then put $1 million or $2 million in for a marketing campaign to say, hey, we're open, we're fully operational. But other than that, you don't need a single penny more than that. We shouldn't have $34 million because it does make us a target, and it does make us a target for every good idea that comes down the pike by every person in the county, whether it be marketing all the events in the north end or maintaining bike paths, and there's merit in all those ideas, don't get me wrong, but it kind of takes away from the core function. So you will see us budget what we receive plus whatever we need to reserve. And we won't hopefully be generating a lot of excess revenue. That's just a different philosophy. But we start, the county has a very detailed budget timeline. We are following that. We're integrated into the county's budget timeline, and we look forward to bringing that back to you. One of the things that's not in the top 25, besides the budget development, is also the beach consultant contract renewal. We'll be bringing that forward later this year. If you have any questions on the top 25 or any issues or items that you'd specifically like for me to discuss, I'd be glad to.
Logo relook.
The logo relook. The logo is not legible, and when you go someplace and you wear the logoed shirt like the team and I do when we leave the area, people always look at you and try to read the script, and then they go, "Where is that?" And so we're going to make it at least legible. That's our goal. We have worked with Zender, and they've done a great job. They've got 4 options. The plan is to take those 4 options to the marketing committee, get their input, get their feedback, go back, address their input and their feedback, bring it back to the marketing committee, get their recommendation, then bring it to you, get your recommendation, if that's something different. And if it's the same, take it to the BCC and get it approved. And then we would like to have that done by the end of May. But that's 2 trips to the marketing committee at least, 1 trip at least to you, and 1 trip at least to the BCC. So one of the things I've had to adjust to is it takes a long time to make anything happen in around here, because everybody's got to kick it back and, well, I would change the color, or I would change that, but you'll have 4 options. We took, just as a feedback mechanism, I showed the CEO forum, since they're not a committee and they don't get any input other than to me. And they were all fairly clear on which one they thought was the best and which one they didn't like. One of the options, I made the team include the 3 umbrellas, because there are a lot of people in this destination that love those 3 umbrellas. Interesting enough, and I don't want to prejudice your opinions, but the CEOs roundly, in fact, everybody, we've shown it to several groups, everybody has roundly said no to the 3 umbrella scope. They don't want to go backward, they want to go forward. That's fine. I don't really care, as long as it's legible, what it looks like. So that's why we'll take it to the marketing committee and bring it to you and take it to the BCC.
Well, go ahead.
One of my favorite subjects in the whole wide world is garbage pickup on Saturday, and I noticed that I've been fighting for 20 years now it's the weakest link in the chain. It's people showing up at $10,000 a week houses, and there's 10 garbage cans and a rat and a couple of raccoons going at it, and just wanted to know where you're at on that and
the county,
what direction we're going in.
Based on our request, the county is rolling this into the whole parking. If you remember, a month or so ago, they pulled back 2 ordinances that one dealt with parking, one dealt with event houses, or wedding houses, whatever you want to call it. And there's about 4 different things that the county has said, these are all interrelated. Let's come up with a master plan or a coordinated plan, a holistic plan that addresses all these issues. The garbage was not originally in there. The garbage is now in there, or will be addressed as part of that overall plan. I know I've talked to a lot of bed tax collectors, and they basically pay for it to get picked up on Saturday and hauled off by a private entity. That's something I think that half-cent, you talk about destination improvement, that is a destination improvement that directly benefits tourists from my perspective. But again, that won't happen overnight because I don't have the unilateral authority to say, I'll just pay somebody, Waste Management, I don't care, to come pick it up on Saturday. There are some arguments, and I understand them, against the Saturday pickup. You've got a lot of traffic on the road. Depending on the time of in the morning, you got a lot of people leaving. In the late afternoon, you got a lot of people coming in. And if you have trash trucks stopping, particularly on Scenic Gulf Drive or 30A, every 25 feet or 50 feet, it can become problematic. But I think we can find a solution. We don't have it yet.
I just would like to recommend you keep it on your top 25.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
The beach access parking plan, would you talk about that a minute?
Yes, sir. Avcon is doing the beach parking study, or doing the parking study for South Walton County. Our part, or as part of that, we identified every parcel that is county owned south of the bay, where we could do, consolidated parking lots and people could shuttle back and forth, or where we could provide additional parking. So we're looking at that. The second, and so that's the county perspective. From our perspective on the beach parking plan, one of the things we're looking at is that the neighborhood accesses, not to be confused with the regional beach accesses, but the neighborhood accesses where you might have 1, 2, or 3 parking spots, repurposing one or more of those to be bicycle, putting in bicycle racks to encourage neighborhood use, not people driving down to the beach. There's 62. They're supposed to be used by the people in that neighborhood, not somebody driving over or somebody driving down from Paxton or something like that to go to that beach access.
Are golf carts included or just bikes?
Just bikes.
Just bikes.
Just bikes. And of course, golf carts aren't allowed, only low-speed vehicles.
They're like mosquitoes. Will you speak about the sports complex a minute, and then I'll leave you?
I will. No, that's fine. We had our last meeting. Mr. Jones and I are preparing to go back to the Board of County Commissioners and telling them what we found. Basically, we had 4 meetings for those of you who didn't keep track. First meeting, we asked folks what they wanted, what type of facilities that they wanted, and we just did tell us what you want. And multi-purpose fields, I believe, was number 1, and baseball, softball was number 2 and 3, and then I think skate park was number 4. But we have the whole laundry list of the priorities that they would like to see. Then the next meeting, we brought in, there are basically 4 different locations. We had Mr. Davis's location over by Peach Creek, which actually had 2 options, the whole thing or half of that land over there. There was one in the coastal center, in the government center over here. Very narrow, long, but it could work. There was Helen McCall Park, an expansion of that. There's 2 or 3 parcels just to the west of that adjoin Helen McCall that could be integrated into that. And then there's the old spray fields that South Walton Utilities, which is basically the old spray fields. If you've ever played golf at Seascape, that fence there, if you look over that fence and you see all that vacant land, that's the old spray fields. Financially, that was probably the best option, but then you get into location of, do you want it that far in the western end, or where do you want to put it? And so that's one of those BCC decisions. Then we had another meeting. Our last meeting was for cost. We brought in some experts, I believe from Dothan, or that build these kind of facilities all over the country. And they told us, here's what a multi-purpose field's going to cost you. Here's what a baseball field's going to cost you. Here's what 2 softball fields are going to cost you, and how much space you need for parking and all this other stuff. And then we had at that meeting, everybody else, I guess, had something to do. The only folks that showed up were the tennis proponents, and so we spent most of the time in that meeting talking about how we need more tennis courts in South Walton. So that's where we are. We're going to take that back and get guidance from the board. My personal view has not changed. If I'm ordered to execute by the Board of County Commissioners, I'll do that. But then my moral and legal responsibility to the county, to the bed tax collectors, is to rent that facility out 24/7, 365, to pay off the bond or the debt or whatever is incurred to build that facility. My sense from all the meetings is everybody wants the same thing. They want more sports facilities for the local kids, and they, if the visitors use it when the local kids aren't using it, everybody's okay with that. What they don't want is something constructed where the primary focus is the visitors to the exclusion of their kids. So I know Commissioner Meadows has talked about a TIF, a tax increment funding district, and if you want me to go into that and how the revenue is generated there, I'll be glad to. They've also talked about a MSBU as a backup to the TIF, which is a Municipal Services Benefit Unit, which would basically be overlaid on the south end, and folks on the south end would pay, in addition, the increase in their property values or a tax in the MSBU case, that revenue would go to pay off those facilities. And then the other item that I know was on the agenda, the BCC did approve a revision to the appointment process and to the appointment for seats on the TDC. That directly affects the timeline is by the end of February, and all of you are eligible to reapply, but by the end of February, we'll get the applications. I think by the first week of March, the screening committee will review those and make a recommendation to the BCC at March 11th, and then they will reappoint, but y'all are the TDC at least through March 11th.
Who's on the screening committee?
It will probably be myself, Larry Jones, or one of his deputies, either Stan or Dee Dee, and a commissioner. Mr. Chapman declined to appoint the commissioner at the meeting, but whoever he appoints, whichever commissioner he appoints, that's who the third person. And that was basically taken right from the Okaloosa County. If you go to their website, the selection process, which has been viewed by the state as part of their oversight or whatever, that came directly from theirs.
Did the makeup come from Okaloosa County too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Well, it depends, the makeup of the screening committee or the makeup of the council?
No, the makeup
Look at the council.
Of the council.
No, the makeup of the council comes from the statute. The only variation from the statute is based on the management study, the lack of a large bed tax collector on the council. And so when we were looking at if we're going to hold a seat for a large bed tax collector, whoever that is, then you probably need to make sure you have one for a small bed tax collector and one for a management company, because, and then you can use that fourth, what has previously been referred to as seat number 9 as a whatever. But that gets you, what we didn't want to do is overcorrect, because if you remember the TDC, I don't know, probably 6-7 years ago, you had nothing but large bed tax collectors. You had Sandestin, you had the Hilton, you had St. Joe, and you didn't have any of the smaller, and there's got to be a balance there. One of our focal points is trying to balance things, as opposed to having all small bed tax collectors or all large bed tax collectors. You've got to kind of have a balance, because they have different perspectives of the destination. They have different needs, quite honestly.
How many seats here would be in non-compliance under the new plan? How many?
Well, right now, by the statute, we are over one bed tax collector.
And so that was the reason, Jim, since none of us were aware of this until we got the email a couple of weeks ago, that we had gone to the BCC, and the BCC had, quote unquote, asked for this to be done. Can you just remind us again how this all started and how we got to this point? Sure.
I told them, I think I had conversations with several of you. I know you and I had a conversation that we were over one bed tax collector. The attorneys and I discussed, whether or not, because there was, is this person, what's the nature of their ownership? It doesn't really matter what the nature of their ownership is. You either are a bed tax collector or you're not a bed tax collector. It's pretty simple. And if you're listed as the bed tax collectors on this council are, as an owner or partner or whatever in a company that collects or remits the bed tax, then you're a bed tax collector. And so once we agreed on that definition, which comes out of the taxing statute, then it was real simple. We have 5 bed tax collectors. The statute 125.0104 says you have to have 3. You can't have any more than 4. So my responsibility to the Board of County Commissioners was to go to them and let them know we have 5 bed tax collectors, and we thought we had up to 7. There were, I think Pam was one. We went and looked. They don't collect or remit the bed tax. Maurice doesn't do short-term rentals. He has rental property, but he only does long-term rentals, so he doesn't collect or remit the bed tax. And so that's how we got there. And so when we went to them, to the BCC, we asked them if they wanted us to go ahead, since we had to fix that issue, if they wanted us to go ahead and address the other issues that were raised by the management study. And they said yes. And so that's how we came back to the recommendation.
So the reason we didn't just address the one individual whose status had changed and decided to reseat the entire council, less the 3 people that are staying in their current roles, was based on, just clarify for me one more time, the fact that we just felt it was better to adopt some of the thoughts throughout the management study.
That was the decision of the BCC. You have to ask them. I mean.
Sure.
Okay.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
No, honestly, it's been a pleasure and I've enjoyed it, but I'm perfectly happy to ride off into the sunset.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Tim, just one other quick thing.
Go
Going
ahead.
back to the logo,
Sure.
the point that I wanted to make is, of course, that has huge financial ramifications with the amount of money that's gone into the branding of this current logo. So again, I won't be here to talk about it, but I didn't realize that we had progressed all the way to even looking at like the 3 umbrellas. I mean, if we're talking about an entire rebranding campaign, that's a big deal.
The logo is not the brand. Let's be clear. The brand is South Walton, and the brand will not change. We are not going back to the beaches of South Walton. I will never recommend that. And I mean, they can fire me or they can order me to do it, and I'll do it. But we are not going to change the brand. I am very clear. In fact, we are trying to clarify the brand. Our recognition, unaided recognition, is negligible in the last research. It didn't even register 1. Okay, it took us 20 or 30 years to get to 3% on the beaches of South Walton. And in the 3 years we've been doing, the beaches of South Walton. In the 3 years we've been doing South Walton or Visit South Walton, we don't even raise the scale. And so we're going to be South Walton, and one of the things you're going to see with both the new website, the new logo, and the other things that we're doing is we are going to hammer home South Walton. Not even Visit South Walton as much. Visit South Walton is us, is the team. Okay, we are South Walton, and that decision has been made by the BCC and the TDC, and that ship has sailed, and we need to reinforce that. And you don't reinforce it with something nobody can read. People don't read script anymore. Kids, I don't even think some schools teach it. Elementary schools teach it anymore. And so, but the brand of South Walton, no, we're going to keep that. We're going to reinforce that. We're going to reinforce it heavily. But the logo, doesn't help the brand, to be honest with you. It looks pretty if you can read it, but it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt necessarily, but it doesn't reinforce it as much as it could. So we're not changing the brand. No, if that was the impression we gave, I apologize.
No, it's good. Thanks for the answer.
Thanks.
All right, any comments from the public? Mr. Miller.
Hello again. My name is Art Miller, and I want to comment on something that was brought up at the last meeting regarding the transportation on 30A. Transportation is a major issue, as you well know, here in Walton County. I think it's the biggest impediment we have to deal with, or the biggest challenge we have to deal with in terms of attracting people here and getting them to come back again. The idea that was proposed by Mr. Tim Pauls of starting small, which I believe some of you generally agreed with in principle, starting small with 3 vehicles, 3 transportation means, whatever they were, trams on 30A, I think is a horrendously bad idea. If I came to you and said I wanted to open a restaurant and I want to serve bad food to begin with, and then eventually when we get clientele, I'll get better food, you'd laugh at me. Yet that basically is what is being suggested here. You have a 38-mile loop on 30A. If you go from back and forth, 38-mile loop. If you want to put 3 vehicles on that 38-mile loop, do the math. At 15 miles an hour, you're talking about every 2 hours something coming by. And so, are you going to wait there as a parent with 2 kids and a beach blanket or a beach chair and so forth for a tram to come by? I think you'd have so much blowback about that it would be counterproductive to do it. So I wish I could stand here and say, hey, I have the perfect solution for you. I don't. I don't even have a solution for you. But what I'm cautioning you against is making a bad decision or supporting that particular approach. It's Sandestin, where I live. We have a tram service that is now working. It is costing a lot of money, and the people who do rentals there pay for it, about $500 per head by about 2,000 people. They pay for that. And Sunshine Shuttle is doing a good job. But in peak season, they have 12 to 15 trams on the road, and that's a 22-mile loop. So, and even then, you have a smoothing problem because it doesn't take a transportation expert to figure out that people are not going to ride the tram in any great numbers at 11 o'clock in the morning. They're already at the beach. Or at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're probably starting to leave. So you have peak periods, say from about 8 to 10, and again from about 4 to 6 when people are coming and going, in which case even 12 buses at Sandestin isn't enough to handle the crowds. So if you transfer that sort of math to 30A, you're asking for a horrendous problem. You're going to have people lined up saying, where is that bus? It's not here. In which case it now starts to impact the reputation of Walton County, and people say, that's not a very good place to go. So again, I wish I could stand here and say I have a great solution for you. I don't. But I would just caution you against making a decision that, on the face of it, sounds like a good idea. And I heard some of you say, well, we have to start somewhere. Agreed, you have to start somewhere, but start with a good plan, not with a half-baked plan. And I realize it's not your responsibility to fund a transportation system. The TDC should not be doing that. But certainly your voices are going to have some say in what eventually happens there. I don't know who's going to pay for it, how it's going to work out. But I would urge you to come up with a better plan than what was suggested last time.
Mr. Miller?
Yep.
At Sandestin, are they allowed to take coolers and chairs on the bus with them?
I believe so. I don't do it. I have a golf cart.
Everybody has chairs.
Yeah, they probably do. You can also rent all that equipment on the beach. Yeah. So some people probably don't do that.
People in Sandestin, there's beach chairs and umbrella service at the beach.
Yeah, I wouldn't see on 30A being able to take all that. You put half as many people on there. I just wonder.
Yeah, I've seen them. I've been out at Sandestin. I've seen them go on the buses with their chairs and a cooler.
Yeah, yeah, they do that. So you just imagine what's going to happen if you have parents and a couple of kids and a cooler and so forth waiting there for 10 or 15 minutes in the hot sun. You're going to have a problem. So, all right, thank you, folks.
Thank you, Art. Let's hope they come with some good solutions then. All right, anyone else from the public? All right, if there's no other comments from the public, do we have a motion to adjourn? Richard motions. Second. Marty seconds. We have all in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Motion adjourned. Thank you.